If a video game could have a midlife crisis, it'd be Frogger. Between 97 and 2005, this series was constantly changing. They cycled through tons of art styles and different directions for the gameplay as Konami poured the Frogger license through as many developers as they possibly could. But at a point, it did seem like they finally settled on a good direction. This new design right here is what they'd stick with for the next 4 games, and the series would begin to focus on adventure-driven stories, with a wide cast of characters that fleshed out Frogger's world and lighthearted humor that often broke the fourth wall.
Promise me you won't get kidnapped in this game.
While I did like the Forgotten Relic, I found the rescue a bit underwhelming. It was okay, I liked the puzzles, but I don't know, the action just really wasn't there. And then Ancient Shadow, well, it had good production value, solid writing and characters, tons of great content, but the level design, it was so annoying and unforgiving. They finally settled on a really good direction for the series, but despite that, the actual quality of the games continued to be all over the place. It really just boiled down to a game of, oh, what'd they get wrong this time? They would only do one more game in this direction before they scrapped it entirely. Only a year later, and they already changed Frogger completely all over again. He's not even a frog-looking dude anymore, he's just a frog-looking frog. You know what I mean. Well, I guess they only have one shot left at this style of Frogger. Frogger Helmet Chaos. I'd love to be optimistic about it, but I somehow doubt a cross-platform PSP and DS game is gonna be the one to finally get it right. But who knows? Maybe it will? I don't know, I'm not really convinced. Well, then again, one of my favorite games in the series was on a portable console after all, so maybe it will surprise me. Either way, they only have one shot at getting this adventure style of Frogger right, because after this, they stopped making them. Frogger's back to his classic beginnings. Dude, what are you talking about? Like, almost all of them are like that. This isn't anything new. I don't ever really get to take a look at PSP games very often on this channel. God, UMDs are so weird. It's like a disc inside a cartridge. It's so strange. Thank God I still have these component cables, dude. Like, I bought them way back in high school to play Peace Walker on a TV after my old PSP screen broke. And of course, the DS version I will also be playing. There's actually not that many differences between the two versions, but I'll still explore how each one is unique from the other. Well, I guess I'll start with the PSP version, but I will also be playing the DS version alongside it, so expect B-roll from both versions throughout the video, but I will be primarily sticking with the PSP version just for the sake of filling the screen. Oh, now that's a sound I haven't heard in a while. You know what, as simple as it is, this is a really great title screen. Like the box art, it leans into 2D illustrations, and I love that logo, it is so good. The big helmet serves as a really good backdrop for the title, and Frogger's dizzy face brings the concept together very well. The title music is another version of the song they used for Ancient Shadow, and I actually really like this one. It's very playful, full of lighthearted instruments, and they've got those frog boinging sounds mixed in there too. If they continued using this theme throughout the Frogger series, I could have seen it sticking, and maybe even becoming iconic. The music in the DS version obviously doesn't sound quite as good since, you know, audio on the DS was a lot more limiting. It doesn't really have the same punch the CD quality audio on the PSP does, which is something you can of course expect from the rest of the soundtrack too. Yo, those menus are clean, dude. They look really nice. They've got this really charming chalkboard aesthetic. The little animations all over the place really bring it to life. The game's cutscenes are now in this picture book style with 2D illustrations setting each scene as the dialogue plays over it. I really like this direction. Seeing more of the 2D art style was really cool. Definitely a lot less of a disconnect between the advertised art and the in-game delivery this time. Frogger agrees to go fetch a moon fruit so Lumpy can make a batch of moon fruit surprise. But in Frogger's absence, however, a funny little crocodile dude comes up and plops a mind control helmet on Lumpy, making him walk away all zombie-like. Frogger then sets out on a big journey to track down Lumpy, while meeting different characters along the way and discovering who's behind these chaotic helmets. Like most Frogger games, it's a very simple plot, but I find this one to be a little bit more effective than usual. You get to see Frogger interacting with a lot of fun characters, and the interactions between them are very entertaining to watch play out.
Is he gone?
I really like the new chemistry between Frogger and Lumpy, because in previous games, they kept saying that they were friends, but he felt more like an uncle character. But here, they really do feel like friends. Instead of being like a mentor figure or whatever, you actually get to see Frogger reacting to Lumpy's different character traits as they hang out together and go on this big fun adventure.
That's not like Lumpy to pass up food. Something must be wrong.
You could say that again. They keep showing feet in these games. Why? It's gross. Stop, please.
Let's just go to the next scene.
They really love breaking the fourth wall in this one. Sometimes it lands for me, sometimes it doesn't. I don't really think we needed Grandpa Phineas interrupting the story constantly to give us definitions.
Adversary, one who opposes or resists.
Hearing Frogger react to the narrator was pretty good, though.
Unaware of the danger that awaited them.
Did you hear that, Lumpy? There's danger that awaits us.
So the gameplay, it's what you'd expect by now, but, I really did not expect this to be the most refined version of it. The hopping is quick, the controls are super tight. I really feel like I have full control over Frogger here. I can zip around really fast, very accurately, and buddy, it feels great. Easily on par with even the best controlling of Froggers. Jumping across platforms has once again been tweaked for the 15th time. While most Frogger games have you anticipate and time the jump, all with varying degrees of snappiness and accuracy, Frogger Beyond did this weird thing where you'd magnetize to the one directly in front of you when you pressed A, but the collision pretends to not be there if you don't do it that way. It worked pretty well if you knew what to do, but if you tried timing it like you did in any other Frogger game, which is what anybody's going to naturally do, you would nonsensically die. Now, interestingly enough, Frogger Helmet Chaos actually combines these two methods. Yeah, pressing the button when the platform is in front of you will have you leap directly to it without fail, but doing it the old way works too. You don't fall through the solid objects when trying to time the jumps like in any other game. The game does not force you to interact with moving platforms in one singular specific way. Now you can do both. Finally, this is what Frogger Beyond should have done. There's no reason why it couldn't have been like this. This actually works quite well too. I feel like the window I have to jump is much wider now. That said, I don't think every Frogger game has to use magnetic jumping. I kind of did like having to time the jumps in some of the older games, but if a game is going to use magnetic jumping, this is how to do it. All of your moves from Ancient Shadow have made a comeback. You got the ground pound, the tongue whip, both variations of the tongue grapple, pushing and pulling blocks with your tongue. They even bring back some elements from Lost 1 and Forgotten Relic too. Those platforms you whip to snap into place and blocks that can only be pushed. Wow, out of every Frogger game I've reviewed so far, this is easily the one with the most robust moveset, and the widest array of mechanics too. There are so many different ways to interact with any given stage. The puzzles have the most variety to them here. I'd say Helmet Chaos probably has the best balance of puzzle and action. A lot of rooms will have brief block puzzles, which I often enjoy, but the addition of push-only blocks really help avoid making the puzzles feel samey, since you have to approach them a little bit differently than the push and pull blocks. We've got these switch puzzles, which have you ground pounding some buttons as quickly as you can, finally giving the ground pound an actual use. That's pretty cool. They also bring back those orb puzzles from Ancient Shadow, where you gotta carry an object that takes away one of your moves, this time narrowing it down to always just taking away the super hop, and wow, these are handled so much better here. Firstly, the objects no longer vanish when they make contact with enemies, that was annoying, and the level design just doesn't waste your time here. It's not a cumbersome gauntlet of patience anymore. The new pacing and smaller scale of these rooms make them way more approachable, and now that they're no longer annoying the hell out of me, I can actually sit back and enjoy them. None of the puzzles really seem to overstay their welcome this time. Instead of being an annoying blockade, they come off to me as a good change of pace, a slower segment to help break up the action, giving the player a break from mashing away at that D-pad, zipping through tons of enemy patterns. As for those enemy patterns, well, they're not the best in the series, but they are far from the worst. They do play it a tad safe. Every path is marked with a very clear trail, and the enemy paths themselves are usually straightforward, but they do combine them enough to get the challenge that I am looking for. And unlike Ancient Shadow, waiting is a non-issue. Even the moving platforms, I'm never wasting my time waiting around for these things to finally line up. The paths are actually fairly consistent. It actually all works. A lot of levels will even employ that type of level design that has you quickly rotating and making all the correct hops in a rapid sequence before they fall down. This was something I really liked about Lost 1's level design, so I was pretty excited to see them bring that back a lot. Health system makes a return. Still not really a fan of that. Again, I've said this before, but I don't know, I just really don't like being able to tank hits, because then you don't really have to solve each pattern fair and square like in some of the older games. And this health system even created a second, much worse problem in Ancient Shadow. The poor level design made it way too easy to drain all of your health in seconds, and with no lives, that means restarting the entire level, losing tons of progress much more often than you should. Thankfully, Helmet Chaos does not have this problem. In fact, the health pickups seem to be placed a little less frequently this time, often only giving you back 1 health. But the level design is actually competent and totally fair, so the health system never actually becomes a problem. You can also find health upgrades throughout the levels. You might find a hidden fly laying around, or you might find a lost rabbit that'll give you one as a reward. Some of these rabbits are huge! Get a load of this guy, I like him! This game is a linear trek without the ability to revisit older stages, so the health pickups are missable bonuses to aid the players that decided to explore a little bit more than they were asked to, so at the very least, I do applaud them for handling the health system in a way that does reward the players for exploration. Okay, so one of the coolest things about this game is that it has multiple pathways through the story. Like I said, it is a linear trek, but there are crossroads and decisions you can make that'll alter your path through, changing which scenes play out and even making you play completely different levels. On my first playthrough, I ended up playing through a beach area and then a crocodile-infested orchard, and then I got eaten by a giant fish and had to find my way out. But on my second playthrough, none of that happened. No, like when I got here, I instead played this mini game, and then when I won it, it brought me to this alternate beach area that concluded with a completely different cutscene. Lumpy then took control, and then I played a whole level as him. Yeah, no, like there are multiple characters you can play as in this game, depending on the path you take. I did not even know about this on my first playthrough, but here I am, hopping through a great hollow as Lumpy the Toad. He controls a lot slower, but as a trade-off, he's got this move that inflates him like a balloon, a result of an allergic reaction or something like that. You can use this move to roll around the stage, no longer adhering to the grid. This way you can ramp up slopes and even crush certain enemies. You'll have to switch between these two forms on the fly to make your way through safely. It's actually really cool. It's really easy to roll off the stage when you're in the ball form, so you'll want to tile hop for accuracy, but you'll still have to hit that balancing act when you want to get by these guys. There's even a third character you can play as too, this brand new character named Barry. You meet her earlier on in one of 2 scenarios, depending on your pathway. She's a member of a traveling caravan, and she'll ask you to save her younger sister.
My name's Barry, and this is my sister, Blue.
Hello.
If you can manage to find a secret exit in the helmet factory, you'll then play through the crocodile mines as her instead of Frogger, offering her unique abilities. Unlike Frogger and Lumpy, Barry can stick to walls, climbing up to new heights. You can even drop off onto platforms down below. Again, this is a really cool new mechanic, and it adds a ton of solid variety. Dude, like the verticality in these levels, the way you really have to get a feel for the 3D space these enemies take up, because it's no longer just a top-down angle, right? There's a third dimension you have to consider here now, and it's so cool climbing up and down and all around. And again, like the other mechanics, they never linger on one for too long. Barry and Lumpy offer a great change of pace, but only for 2 levels each. I feel like that was the perfect length to really get everything out of these abilities before moving on back to the main gameplay. You could actually unlock Barry in Ancient Shadow too, by finding those hidden passwords in the bonus levels. You can punch one of these in to replay that level as her, using her wall climbing ability to unlock even more bonuses. But I don't know, if you ask me, it's a lot more meaningful to create original levels surrounding these abilities. That way you really get the most out of them, instead of just making you replay a level you already beat with one brief side path you can now take. I mean, in Ancient Shadow, Barry may as well be the key to a chest, where in Helmet Chaos, these levels are tailored to those abilities, and they really get the most out of them because of that. This is honestly probably my favorite thing about this game, because every time I review another one of these Frogger games, one thing I'm always hoping for is the introduction of new mechanics. Tile hopping is a really simple formula, but I know there's gotta be ways to make it more interesting, more elaborate without, scrapping the idea, and adding these new characters with these unique abilities was a really good way of doing it. Well, we've also got those boss fights. This is something the series has always been kinda all over the place with, and Helmet Chaos is no exception. Some bosses are pretty fun, like both fights of Dr. Wani, they're pretty cool. You dodge everything while using your tongue whip attack to sabotage his equipment. This big moth guy you fight inside the fish is also pretty cool too. You gotta jump up and knock these wiggly things into it as you dodge its attacks. Most of the others are all just a test of patience though. This one's pretty annoying. It's an auto-scroller and you just gotta dodge and wait for it to run out of fuel. This guy here is so easy, it's ridiculous. You just hit him over and over and make sure not to fall off and you win in like 1 minute. This alligator boss is the one I always find myself most annoyed with on repeated playthroughs. I do like the character though. The running gag does get a bit tired. It's the old trope of,
I'm gonna repeat what you said wrong because I can't hear.
I'm right here.
What? You're gonna let me steer?
yeah, that certainly is a joke I had to hear a billion times as a kid. It does at least have a pretty good payoff though, I will give it that much.
Hair Fizz Proctor Swanee.
I'll never tell you where Dr. Wani is!
But yeah, the fight. You gotta make him destroy all the computers in the room, but there doesn't seem to be any consistent way to get him to use certain attacks. You just have to wait and wait and wait until he decides to finally wreck them. Getting most of them usually doesn't take too long, but whenever there's only a few left, sometimes I find myself dodging and waiting, like, way too long before I finally get lucky. This fight would be a lot better if the player had more control over the fight's pace, because, like, if you could just line up an attack and then dodge to make him hit the computers, that would be way better. But no, you just wait and wait and wait until an attack just happens to hit one. This chef boss has the same problem. It's not nearly as long or annoying, but it really just boils down to dodging simple attacks until the game says you've won. You know what? I think that's why I like the Dr. Wani fights more, because you control the pace of the fight. The fight ends when you cut all of the ropes, it ends when you break all of the engines, and you have to actively work to do that. You're not just waiting for something to happen. Yeah, the boss fights are probably the weakest thing about Helmet Chaos, but hey, they can and have been much worse. The worst I felt about one of these bosses is being kind of annoyed for a few minutes, which I'd easily take over the long-winded fights of the rescue or that horrible fight from beyond. Let's talk version differences, because I was actually pretty impressed with how similar the two were. Both versions are practically identical. The levels, the plot, the playable characters, everything is exactly the same. The only differences are merely graphical. The PSP version, of course, is in widescreen, so you get a much better view of what's coming left and right, but I never felt like my view was restricted in the DS version. You still see everything you need to see. There's no screen crunch here. The extra space of the PSP version feels more like a nice bonus instead of a necessity. On the other hand, the DS's D-pad I find is way better than the PSP D-pad, at least for games like this. Its thin clickiness, it makes it so much faster and easier to punch in precise inputs. The PSP's D-pad I find a tad bulkier, a bit wobblier. It was pretty rare, but like sometimes I'd press up and it would somehow also register left. It even killed me once or twice. I guess it's not really like a major thing or anything, but the DS version does feel a little bit better because of that D-pad. One thing I didn't really expect, and I actually was kind of impressed by this, is that both versions run at 60 FPS. Yeah, even the DS one. Very admirable them making sure to hit that on both platforms instead of just making the DS 130, because, you know, higher frame rates increase the input's responsiveness, and in a Frogger game, that is pretty important to making sure the game controls as well as possible. Second screen on the DS version does not really add much. I like the presentation of the cutscenes with them, but otherwise the second screen is just used to show your stats, which the PSP version didn't have a problem showing on the main screen. One kind of cool thing about the DS version is that you can plug in some older Frogger games into the GBA slot to unlock extra costumes. Yeah, remember when DS games would do that? I remember that's how you would trade Pokemon between the DS and GBA versions of Mystery Dungeon, also how you unlocked bonus boss fights in Mega Man ZX. Having one of these three games in the GBA slot will unlock one costume each, though you can unlock the same costumes in the PSP version via other methods, so they're not exclusive or anything. I always loved it when Nintendo did weird stuff like this, like just the idea of interacting with your console in an unusual way to unlock something is always really fun to me, you know, like a Phantom Hourglass pushing the map together, or Hotel Dusk with the music box, or connecting your Game Boy Advance to the GameCube with the link cable. I've always just been a big sucker for that kind of stuff. Frogger's also got a bunch of hats you can unlock in a variety of different ways. Some I ended up getting by simply completing the game, but you can also get some other ones by finding hidden shops and by using passwords. You can even find passwords that unlock stuff in Ancient Shadow, which is pretty cool, but they only give you like bonus letters. This one's really weird.
Will you be my Valentine? Love, your secret admirer.
And they also give you a seed to plant in your front yard, which is like, I don't know. Okay. I think it would have been a lot cooler if that's how you unlocked Barry in this game instead, because, you know, it would have been like bringing the PSP character on over to the PS2 game. That would have been really cool. Super underutilized character, by the way. I feel like she adds the final piece to a great Frogger friend group dynamic. Seeing more games with these three together would have been really cool, especially since each character can bring different moves to the table. But after Helmet Chaos, they stopped making Frogger games in this style, immediately rebooting the series again.
I'll be back.
Sorry, Wani, but you're not going to be seeing any sequels. You and Lumpy and Barry and everybody else, you were all scrapped from the canon to reboot the series once again. Oh my god, oh, it hurts this time, dude, it really does, because, like, they finally had it figured out. They finally figured out how to make a proper modern Frogger game that works. They finally had this big, fun, colorful cast of characters that was really entertaining, and you could actually play as them in a way that, like, enhanced the game a lot. Like, they really finally nailed it. And then they ducked out and hit the reset button again. Like, why? Why'd they do that? Well, I'll tell you why. Money's why. And unfortunately, Konami doesn't love video games. Konami loves money. Ancient Shadow and Helmet Chaos didn't really sell that well. In fact, the series' sales have been on a steady decline since The Great Quest. There's almost no information about some of these games online, and I'm starting to realize why. Barely anybody played them. For like 10 freaking years, Frogger was a really mismanaged series. Konami would desperately unplug and reboot and throw it around left and right, trying to make something that would sell like the old games did. But I guess every time they got numbers they didn't like, so they'd throw it all out and try something new, which I guess is why the series bounced between so many different developers and so many different directions. But instead of doing that, they should have spent more effort on the marketing. Like, do you ever remember seeing a commercial for any of these games? I sure as hell don't. I couldn't even find any online either. They kept changing the series because the idiots in charge at Konami had no idea why these games were selling. So instead of reacting each time like they had to try something different with a different developer in a different direction to get different sales results, they should have focused on refining a quality product and then spreading the word. So what, is that my job now? I gotta figure out which frickin' Frogger games are the good ones and spread the word? Well, in that case, buddy, let me tell ya, Frogger Helmet Chaos kinda rules. And it owns. And it kicks ass. Like, I think this is now my favorite Frogger game, Lost Wand now being my second favorite. I think Lost Wand is a lesser flawed experience, but Helmet Chaos just does so much more, and so much of it actually lands. This is the game that finally learns from the series' mistakes. It takes everything that worked throughout the series, and it ditches everything that didn't. And on top of that, it finds new and genuinely good ways to bring it even further. It is so crazy to me that this frickin' portable Frogger game that nobody played, this was the one to finally do it. Like, I really was expecting this just to be another Frogger game with another slew of unique problems, but I think the worst I can say about this game is that the boss fights are kinda not that good. But considering how much I really enjoyed the rest of this thing, that's nothing. It's a fairly short game, only being a couple of hours long, but because of the multiple pathways and the different ways the story can unfold with different levels and characters and costumes to unlock, I found this to be the most replayable Frogger that I've reviewed. I mean, I beat this game 5 freaking times across both versions for this review, and with each replay, it would grow on me more and more. I mean, that 5th replay was actually completely for fun, not even for the review. I may get a little bit annoyed hitting some of those boss fights, and the health system isn't my preference, but everything else, it hits the nail on the head way too well for me not to love this game. It is a crying shame that this was the final one that tried this style of Frogger, and I get why. They made way too many games that were way too similar, all flawed in different ways, in such a short time frame. By the time they finally got it right, they've already mismanaged the series so much that it never had a chance. Frogger should have been a series that put out more polished games less frequently, but instead they were fumbling around until this direction for Frogger just wasn't making the money anymore, and that was their fault, not the fault of this very good direction for Frogger. A bittersweet note to end on. A great game, but a very messy and mismanaged series. At the very least, I would recommend Helmet Chaos. If you think these Frogger games look kinda interesting or fun to play, this is one of the ones you should absolutely get. Both versions are great. It just depends on what platform you prefer. Personally, I'd go with the DS one because I like the D-pad a lot more, but yeah, man, I really did not expect the frickin' portable games to be all the best entries in the series. You know what? They say you should never judge a book by its cover, right? Another time. We'll get to it. Yo, what's up? Thank you for watching my whole review series on Frogger. I hope you guys enjoyed it. I literally just wanted to know what all these freaking games were, because I always saw these Frogger games everywhere, but I never knew what any of them, like, were. I want to get to Toy Trials sometime, but not now. Now I want to talk about something different. I want to talk about not Frogger for once. I also have